Hi, I'm Susan Platt, and welcome to Platitudes. Find your roar. Today, I'm back in Leesburg, my new home, with my new friend, who's a new neighbor in Leesburg. Mary Tucker is the CEO of UPick Health. She found her roar maybe a couple different times, but now she's really roaring, and we're so glad she's here in Leesburg. So, Mary, tell me, how did you find your roar?
Well, I met you, and that was good. And I think it's a journey, as you and I have been talking about. Growing up as, born in the 60s, living as a teenager through the 70s, 80s, you were there, a whole bunch of us were there, and we're in a different time now. I grew up with a series of Me Too moments that we considered as young women part and parcel to being a woman in today's society, right? So we didn't really view them as Me Too moments, which is why I'm so grateful we're in the time that we're in now. As I got older and as I was advancing more and more in my career, and it was very clear to me early on that career was really my chosen path. I didn't think that I was best suited for child rearing. So
Some aren't,
and some are, and for me, I wasn't. But that doesn't mean I'm not committed to kids and all of this and creating a better life for them. But I'd say sometime around 2010. I turned a certain age, and I woke up, and I woke up to myself, and I woke up to, kind of some crashing Me Too moments that were accelerating as my career was accelerating, and the injustice of it just seemed to become more and more intolerable. So then I went through a period of anger, I think. Which I don't think is helpful. So I think I'm still finding it. There's a roar that is what I like to equate to Horton Hears a Who, that fabled story, the Dr. Seuss story where the Whoville, we're here. I felt a bit like that, certainly with my company a little bit in the sea of healthcare. Personally, certainly since Trump has been elected into office, and we're every day we're waking up to something new in ourselves, something new in people that we meet, something new in a groundswell of resistance over here and a groundswell of resistance over there, and I'm still finding my voice within all of that. So it's a journey.
When you were younger, in growing up with your family, was there any direction politically, or was there any direction in terms of business?
Well,
what did you learn so much from
your? No, that's so great. So my one of my father's favorite jokes when I was a kid was from Phyllis Diller, when she said the thing that she learned from her mother's knee was what a bunch of bony knees look like. So that kind of describes my experience growing up. My mother was a frustrated feminist. I'll tell you a story. Her father owned coal mines in West Virginia. So she was, the Strawberry Festival princess type. And she had 6 kids. I was the last of 6, big Catholic family. But it was evident to all of us. I don't want to give the impression that my mother was a bad mother, although I will say she was a lousy mother. She did not cook in the context of what mothers were defined as at the time. She did not cook, and we all viewed her as lousy because of that. She didn't clean after us. No, we did our own laundry. I remember, 7 years old and, trying to figure this stuff out. She had a story that she loved to tell, where it was before I was born. The 4 oldest were, my sister and I weren't born yet. And she made this big dinner for the family, and she served the dinner.
She
on
cooked?
the plates. Hold on. This is before we were born. And my father made a joke, said, "You don't expect me to eat this, do you?" And she said, "No." And she picked the tray back up and she took everybody's food back off the plate, threw the platter into the kitchen,
No.
and that was the last time she ever stepped foot in the kitchen. My father had to learn how to cook, so he really was the chef in the house. So I grew up in this environment that was outside of the norm in the time we were in anyway.
Well, she kind of found Aurora at that point.
Well,
didn't
she was kind of a roaring person anyway, but all under this, kind of heavy weight that her family put on her to say, no, your job is to learn how to play golf and learn how to play bridge. And those were the two things that she pretty much knew how to do. So as the women's movement, I remember being a little girl in the 60s, and my father was really struggling with the women's movement. I mean, women's place was in the house and taking care of the kids and having babies and all of this. And my mother was screaming, yes, burn the bras, burn the bras. But she was within this framework of, all of her friends weren't with her in that. So she kind of was behind the curtain but in the house, in front of the curtain.
So today she'd probably be right in her element, huh?
Today, I think if my mother were to grow up in today's society, if she were to be born now, she would not have children. She probably would even leave the Catholic Church because she found them to be too oppressive, despite the fact that it was all she knew. I am afraid she would have voted for Trump.
Why?
Well, because she voted for Ross Perot. So you remember, she liked being a contrarian. Do you know what I mean? And that was her rebellion. So wherever the mainstream was going, even in the household, she'd just go on the outside of it, I think, just because.
So what did all that teach you? What did that teach you?
I had a teaching moment, but it happened, it was an epiphany for me. So here I have my company, and we work with some healthcare providers who provide specialty services in family planning and reproductive health. And in staying close to patient stories, and we're a largely women employed. I only have 75 employees, and only 3 of them are guys, and we love them. They're feminists. But getting close to certain circumstances that some women are operating under, I hearken back to when I was a teenager. And I've since written a blog about it at the encouraging, and this is part of Finding the Roar. This was something I never talked about until this blog maybe 6 months ago or 7 months ago. So when I was a teenager, I lost my virginity and got pregnant. And this was back right after Roe v. Wade was passed. And I got kicked out of school, high school. I was going to a boarding school in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I came home. I really had no where to turn. I didn't know anything about any of that. And it wasn't anything that we ever talked about in a Catholic household. And my mother insisted, even though at the time I didn't agree with her, this is my journey here, that is still unfolding, but she got very angry, really rocket angry, and was screaming, no, at the fact that I was raped. And she was insistent that legal action be taken against this kid, and my dad was saying, look, just, calm down, and why don't we send you to Florida? I mean, she really got physically ill by this, threw up, and we shipped her to Florida to be with my aunt while my father and I dealt with this. And my father became my caretaker, and we did go to a Planned Parenthood there, and I did have an abortion. And for many, 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 many years, I struggled with guilt and stigmatization around it, self-imposed and otherwise.
Right.
And I vowed then, and I still believe that it should be legal, but I vowed that, like for some people it's an emotional experience and it's hard. And for me, it was hard, and it was one of those emotional experiences. Doesn't mean I would make a different decision now, but it was hard and remained hard. Well, jump cut to Me Too, jump cut to when I started my company, and I'm employing women who are of college age, who are defining rape on a very wide spectrum, and staying close to young women and listening to their stories and their definitions and how they, and then kind of looking and seeing what's happening in the media where we're talking about, college campuses. So the experience that I had was very similar to college campuses, drinking, and the next thing you know, you end up in a room that you don't recognize, and you're having this frightening experience. But back when I was growing up, that was not rape. That was my fault.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And like a crashing epiphany. And my mother's dead. I'm not able to tell her, except through, prayer and meditation. Right. I get her. I understood what she was saying. Yeah. I resented her at the time. I thought it was easier for her to believe I ended up in this situation as a rape instead of the situation I was in, which was I shouldn't have been at this party.
Right.
No, she was actually right. I should have been at that party. I should have been able to have a good time at that party, and I should not have been lulled and ended up in a room where I didn't know what was going on. I didn't consent. I was terrified. I didn't know how to say yes. I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know anything about any of that. And that's what my mother was saying. And remembering her now, everything I do with women, in my work, in friendships, new friendships, with legislators, she's back there. Her voice is back there. And in the years that I misunderstood her, she's my symbol.
Now you get her.
Right? Now I get her. So now it's like, well, I've got another, I like to think, my grandmother lived until she was 109.
Wow.
So I consider myself only at the halfway mark right now. And I now, with my mother's voice behind me, another thing about my mother, that's part of this motivator. My mother and my father was this, he also was an entrepreneur, so that's where that comes. He used to say we came from a long line of entrepreneurs, and we do. I've got entrepreneurs all over the family. So we just it's sort of a natural extension of who we are. But he was a traditionalist when it came to women. He used to love to say at parties, well, women are different. They shouldn't get equal pay. They get pregnant. And if my dad was alive now, I'd say, well, guess what? Not by themselves, at least not all the time. But he was this kind of provocative guy on the, I'd say, I loved him dearly. But he was a bit of a misogynist without realizing it. He didn't realize it.
Well, at the time, it wasn't necessarily considered
It was Mad Men era.
So now you've taken this horrible experience.
Yeah.
But
well, let me just say this: the abortion itself was not the horrible experience. Was the years of beating myself up.
So you were traumatized for years.
Correct. By my own
experience.
Inexperience. And it wasn't the care experience that caused the trauma. It was all of the events leading up to it.
And so now you started your company.
Yeah.
To help other women.
Yeah. Well, the company is framed around, look, I grew up in technology. So a woman in technology is its own unique brand of Me Tooism, right? Mm-hmm. And remains so, right? We still see stories coming out of Silicon Valley. I mean, they're, not as much as in the last year and a half because they've got a spokesperson now in the White House that they can, kind of hide behind. But prior to Trump going into office, there were a lot of stories out of Silicon Valley just that, forget a woman in tech. It's a very, very difficult thing for a woman to be in. So I started UPIC knowing that there's not a company that starts now that isn't some form of a tech company, particularly if they're in the services business. So even though we provide patient services with humans, we also are a tech company that leverages technology and helps our clients with the technology and make the workflows better. But I wanted to create a place where women could go and thrive professionally. If they chose careers, they could come and work in a place where they are promoted based on their merit. And they don't have to fight forgive me, a male component that is eager to not let them excel, whether it's subconscious or not. So we have that in our organization. I mean, like I said, I've got 3 guys that work for us, and it's all equal footing. Everybody's making the same amount of money. They have the same opportunities presented to them to grow to all extents possible. I promote from within. I had to bring in a director from the outside, but we had to put them through the paces and meeting with all the women. How are you supporting women? Right? You know, they share with us their sisters and stuff. And it's not that we're being unfair to them, but I want to create an environment where men and women are on absolute equal footing. And that's what we've got. And, you know, we're still a work in progress. There's some women. I'll tell you, finding the roar in helping women help each other
It's tough sometimes.
is tough sometimes, right? I literally had an employee look at me and say, I cannot stand women. And she's a woman. And I said, so you're talking about yourself. So let's figure out what the self-loathing is about so that you can resolve that and then cascade the goodness out to your sisters. How we work against each other is for me the next wave of work that we need to do. Right?
So you're active politically now.
Yeah. Well, I've always been a little active. I'm afraid I've always been active politically because I was shamed into it. I was in my early 20s once, and there was a guy named he's now passed. He was a casting director from Arena Stage in DC, and in my very early days out of college, I was an actor. And we were walking on the street. I don't know. I was working him for some part or something. And he said, well, did you vote? And I was like, oh, no, I didn't get around to it. And I literally never got a chance to work at Arena. I never auditioned at Arena after that conversation. Not only that, but the tongue lashing I got was absolutely deserved. And I'll never forget it. I was standing on the streets of DC getting my head handed to me for not voting. And I thought, I'm never, ever, ever going to allow that depth of shame in my life and soul ever again. And damn it, he was right. So here I am in the nation's capital where local news is national news, right? Very often international news.
Yep.
So very early on in my 20s, I decided, well, there's a good change for me to just start getting involved, start getting to know what's around you. And so I've always been very, very actively involved in politics. I like to know who I'm voting for, what do they care about. I don't care as much, even though I was a registered Democrat for my voting life, but I'm now an independent because I can't wait to see where we go. I don't think we have 2 parties anymore. I think we have about 80. You know, and I suppose that's okay, provided all 80 are represented in some way in policy. And so I think for me, being an independent until I see where the parties ultimately shake out in ideology is a little bit more comfortable for me. Despite the fact that I still lean more Democrat. Like, try dragging me to vote for a Republican right now, and it would be very difficult. So I'll say I'm an independent, but I'm even leaning, as I'm learning, I started leaning way closer to socialist democracy. I'm leaning there, but I'm not there yet because I'm also a capitalist.
Okay, so what do you think would be Donald Trump's worst trait or best trait for women?
Well, how am I supposed to answer that? All right.
I know we have a lot to pick from, but there's got to be
something.
Look, is it the angry mob thought?
No, here's the thing. I think he's got record numbers of women in leadership positions in his administration. I think he does. I mean, you could read the story of the women in the Obama White House who banded together because they were being ignored in meetings. And they said, all right, we're going to give each other a code word, a buzzword, and we're going to use this word to redirect back to us so that we're together and we have a voice. And that's what they did, and that's how they got heard within the Obama White House. Kind of surprising when we think about the great guy that Obama is, and he's still a great guy. I mean, we should, you know, if we could somehow figure out as humans how to disassociate character from, I guess, political points of view that may have a much larger picture to them that we may not all know what the inputs are. But on the surface, I would say he's got a lot of women in positions of power. Kellyanne Conway, she may drive us crazy. We were talking about this the other day. She's actually very good at what she does. We may find it abhorrent what she's doing. Same thing with Sarah Sanders. But look at those women standing up and the beatings that they take. And they take them every day. From me, from you, from all of us, right? And they take them. That's pretty powerful when you think that these women are in these positions. So on that score, I'd say he's done something well. On another score, he's a change agent. He's the wrong change agent. But he's a change agent, and I do agree that government, as it stood, needed to be changed. I think, so then let's table all that and say, how is our change agent doing, and how is he, and you know, the worst things, I think, is he's igniting the base urges of humans, right?
Well, I think that's...
Well, he's
Yes.
You know, and he's doing it at a time when desperation is at an all-time high. I think any time, you know, this is my big thing right now, our unemployment numbers are just false. And then we equate it to the addiction increases and the sexual transmitted
Right.
disease epidemic that we have. There's the American population is in a race to escapism as a way of living, right? And he's not helping. He's actually, you know, kind of throwing poppy seeds on them. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's keeping it's an incredibly frightening time that we're in right now. It's very Hitler-esque.
I do want to talk a minute about the new part of your company that you're starting. As everyone knows, with me, we lost my stepdaughter due to addiction, and so many people, as we're just discussing,
Yeah,
having these issues.
yeah,
But you're starting a new part of your company
Yeah.
that helps deal directly with that, particularly in areas where there may not be as much of a presence of psychiatric help.
absolutely.
Tell us a minute about that.
Yeah, thank you. So, so our company is dedicated to healthcare and healthcare access and revenue cycle, you know, administration. But we deal primarily with Medicaid patients. We talk to about 120,000 of them a month in different parts of the country, and we're continuing to grow in that space. And because we can't deliver, I don't believe anybody can deliver a service without listening to the end user and what is their experience with that service. So I consider my job to be the ear to the ground. You know, I create a healthy place for employees to work and thrive, and I'm going to listen. And I was listening to patient circumstances around the country, particularly in the middle part of America, and we hear them. They call us. They call our clients, and we talk to them. And for some of them, we have to talk to them about financial qualification for certain services if they don't have enough money to cover their care, and for some reason they're in a state where there wasn't Medicaid expansion, what have you. And we started getting exposed to the deep depression that was existing within patient populations all around the country, particularly ones who were really, you know, hand to mouth or living in homeless shelters, etc. Then we had some, because we're in an environment where we recognize that if you're dealing with potential trauma incoming, you could also have residual trauma. But we've also had some rather extreme traumatic experiences from our employees because we created an environment where they can feel safe talking about it. And I mean, we had one young woman whose boyfriend was shot and killed right in front of her, out in, I think it was Winchester, Manassas a couple years ago. And she came in a different woman, a changed woman. So we started thinking, what can we do about this? And I was privileged enough to be a part of Governor-elect Northam's policy group on the opioid crisis, and I went down to Richmond. This was in December before the inauguration. And you know, we'd really been talking about, you know, how do we solve this problem? It's this very expensive problem, and there's this, you know, notion of, I need help right now, like right now, in this moment. Where do they go? Who do they get to? There are these hotlines that they can call, but that's not a right now moment. That's a please hold moment. And if someone's in a real crisis, please hold is not the message they need to hear. So I was in this room with providers and pharmacists, and they were talking about their challenges, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks that theirs is a volume problem. It's a volume problem, and technology needs to be there to solve the volume problem. And I had been working with this video company, and you know, a former colleague, who's now their CEO, was selling it to me, you know, because it's a new technology that can handle high volume. But I was thinking, yeah, I think this is the future. I do. I believe it's in the future, not just healthcare, but you know, as artificial intelligence takes over simple stuff, harder stuff is going to require a human in all channels.
So it's one-on-one.
It's one-on-one, and I thought, well, you know, I've always thought video is going to give a more personal, but it's also more efficient, right? Chatting is inefficient. Miscommunications happen. Chat, phone calls, emails, miscommunications happen. Face-to-face, very hard to have a miscommunication. But how do you do face-to-face without brick and mortar? And how do you do it in high volume? So this video platform can do that. But I was like, I don't know where I'm going to use it, because I got to get my clients on this. And then I was at this thing, and as I was walking out, I went, that's it.
Right.
Centralized team of licensed clinical social workers. All you need is internet access, and there's broadband initiatives going on in all these rural communities all around the country. But even then, all you need is a cell phone. So we had this app developed for us, and we're just standing up. We'll see our first patients. It's a peer-to-peer counseling right now for some of our current clients, patients that we already know need a little bit of extra support. Legislation has to catch up with us, so we're working with some folks that you've introduced us to. Thank you for that, which is why I say I find my roar after meeting you. Or maybe you're teaching me how to harness my roar into words. But we're now working with some state legislators. We're working with an organization out in California who's doing the same in California, because we definitely need some legislation to catch up with us. But our goal is to have a centralized team of licensed clinical social workers through this application that gives video access right now, when they need it. Boom.
What a great
Press
service.
a button and there it is. And assuming that the rapport is built, that's now their person. They don't have to be pounced around to the next person. They don't get put it. This becomes their person that they then can connect to directly in perpetuity.
What a great thing. What a great way to find your roar. It was so great to meet you. It's glad to have you here.
Thank you so much.
You're doing so many good things for so many of us women, but now we have the opportunity, as I close out Platitudes, Find Your Roar, I do this funky thing.
Okay.
Where I turn and, I open my mouth, and then they put this roar. So if you're going to turn toward your left, we're going to open our mouth.
I turn toward my left.
Platitudes.
Okay.
Find your roar. Now here we go. Open your mouth.